Welcome to the History Below the Pines Storytellers Collection. I'm your host, Levi Kessler, and we spend a lot of time looking at maps and reading archival documents here at History Below the Pines, but the true history of this region isn't written in ledgers. It's etched into the lives of the people who were there. Today, we go deeper than we've ever gone before. Today, we are talking about the Homestake Mine. At its peak, it was the deepest gold mine in the Western Hemisphere, a massive, dark world operating 8,000 feet below our feet. For generations, this mine was the heartbeat of the various communities that dot the northern Black Hills landscape. But what was it actually like to stand in the darkness? To rely on the person who is working next to you. Today, we are putting the history books aside. We're sitting down with three men who actually lived, worked, and breathed everything Homestake. Their names, John, Dennis, and Clyde. And these are their stories, unfiltered, raw, and absolutely essential to understanding who we are today. This is episode 6, Voices from the Shaft. We start with John, who spent his career at the Homestake as an electrician. When you talk to him, you get a unique sense of the sheer scale of the operation, not just the physical size of the mine, but the complex high voltage reality of keeping a massive industrial city running thousands of feet underground. This is his story. Welcome to the podcast, John. Well, today joining us is John. He was a miner at the Homestake Mine. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, although most miners wouldn't call me a miner, I was an electrician,
Okay.
an electrician's helper, um, the lowest of the low. Um, but still, got to see an awful lot of homestake. That was fun.
Yeah, what was it like working in the mine? I'm sure you got to work underground.
Yeah, I started off way back when I first got out of high school. One of my best friends, his dad worked at homestake, and he said they have summer jobs, so we applied, and we worked for a couple summers up in Spearfish Canyon. um, at the hydroelectric plants. That was fun. Um, Getting paid, getting paid the lowest surface laborer wages just as summer hires. But still, you're getting to do that in Spearfish Canyon and get a good tan. That's nice. It was ditch digging work. Um, one of the hydro plants was fed by this big redwood pipeline that diverted some of the creek water from up the canyon, brought it down, and then dropped it into this hydro plant, and it leaked like a sieve, and it was kind of guaranteed job for summer kids. That was nice. But then the third summer I went back, they said, "Oh no, Schultz and Christopherson, you guys are going underground." So we thought, "Oh no, not going. I don't know if I'm going to like that." Found out I loved it underground. It was fascinating. Um, Really quite an experience. First summer I worked. And I worked there a couple summers, and then ended up going year round for the next 3 years. I took the scenic route through college. Um, Ended up working around the year, summers and winters and everything, with crew there. But the first summer I worked the deep levels crew. It was the electrical department crew that took care of all the electrical problems from the 4850 down to the 8,000, 8,200 foot to the sump there. Um, and then the next year I worked the upper levels crew, which was everything between the 800, I guess 300 if somebody had a problem there, but the 800 and the 4850. And we worked different, so got to see an awful lot of the mine. Anybody that turned in a trouble ticket, we need a slusher fixed back in this stope, 19 ledge, or something fixed here, or work on hang new cabling, or set up new fans, coolers, um, all of that. And so we got to work all over the place. So saw a lot of different things, and it was just a fascinating thing. And then when I went year round, I would schedule my classes at school mines. so I could get all my classes done in 4 days a week and then work 3 days a week, the other 3 days at Homestake. And for that, I worked for the motor shop, the battery department. All the underground trains were powered by. They were just getting rid of the last of the air motors when I was down there, so everything moved to electric, and they all had the big batteries on them, sometimes 6 ton, 8 ton batteries. And we had to go down and shut off the chargers over the long weekend so that they wouldn't boil dry, and check the water levels, fill them up if they need it in each of the cells. Sometimes taking hydrometer readings to check the acid level. Was the acid still good or not, and adjust charging levels and so on. But that meant that we had to go to every place there was an electric motor. The motor is what they call the little locomotive that pulls the trains underground. Underground has a different language for everything down there. You can't say floor, ceiling, walls. You have to say the back, the ribs, the back, the sill, things like that. They all have different words for it. But so we got to go everywhere on a weekend. We go everywhere from the 800 foot down to the 8,000 foot level, and in all regions of the mine. If they had drain charging there, we locomotive charging there, we'd go down there and work with them. So my partner and I, another student, we'd tear around that mine like crazy, and it was kind of fun. We'd be down there when it was empty, mostly empty, except for the shaftmen, and we got to see a lot of things.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure that was really cool to be underground like that. When we announced that we were going to do a podcast episode featuring the old Homestake miners and old Homestake staff,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of questions that were sent in and a lot of questions that were commented. Um, I was like, well, am I going to ask John, being that he kind of worked in the electricity region of the mine?
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you kind of got to experience everything. One of the main questions was, what was it like to work at the 8,000 foot level?
It's hot, really hot. Um, when I first started going down there, they only had one way in and out of the 8,000 foot level, and that was down through the sixth shaft. So since you didn't have another shaft going down there, you couldn't get any cross flow ventilation, and because of that, it was hot. I guess when they cut the rock, when they first cut through the rock down there, the native rock temperature was like 134 degrees or something outrageous like that. One of the longest days I ever spent, that was when I was working the deep levels crew. Um, Two electricians and two of us summer helpers went down. We had to change out one of the chillers. We were changing out a cooler for a chiller. Now, a cooler was something that takes chilled water and runs that through. Essentially, it's a backwards radiator running. Well, no, it's kind of like a regular radiator, but it's taking that cool water, putting it in a, for all intents and purposes, a big radiator looking thing, and then pushing the hot mine air across it, cooling it down. And they had giant chillers up to cool the water and then pipe it down through insulated. Those are up on the 5,000 foot level. And then they pushed chilled water throughout the lower levels, everything below the 5,000, in these insulated pipes. And that worked that worked kind of okay. But you could get a lot more cooling power out of it if you had an actual air conditioning unit. And that was a um, chiller. And I hope I don't have those two terms backwards. So
Sure.
we had to
Yeah.
go down. We had to go down and unhook one, and then they had brought down the other. So we had to move it up into place, hook it up, and they all ran off of 480 volts, which was standard power down there. Um, but to do that, we had to shut off power to that level. So suddenly all airflow stopped. Normally, miners that work down there, even when they were cutting the drifts down there, going across the level, they'd have a big fans that would blow air through vent bags, big, about 12, 18 inches across, rubberized canvas bags to kind of carry the air down that tunnel and blow air down there. And these guys had taken just strapped that to their back so that the air is washing over them and trying to keep them a little bit cooler, get some airflow across them. And they would take that right out of the chillers, coolers, whatever, and keep them cold. But we had to shut down power to the whole mine. You know, that whole, not the whole mine, but to the whole 8,000 foot level. There wasn't anybody else working down there, just the two electricians and my buddy and I. And suddenly no air movement. And the water that would come out of the drip out of the sill, because it's kind of drippy in some areas, would actually kind of burn. It was a little bit too hot to be a comfortable shower. Boom, it hit you. And it's so humid down there, it got to be foggy, and the temperatures, well past 100 and up. And it's like working in a steam bath. And we'd work for a while, and we're hanging cable. This cable's this big armored, heavy duty cable, about 3 inches across. And we're hanging cable and moving that. And it's all just, it's some heavy effort. But you get so hot so quick. We'd stop and run some water from there was a hose near us, and we'd run that chilled water over our heads. And we'd work until you started feeling kind of stupid. And you're not feeling right and everything. You walk over and run that cold water overhead, and you kind of feel your brain come back. And then you go back work for another 15 minutes until you started feeling the heat again. My buddy did get heat stroke. He had to go out. I had to take him out to the shaft, put in an emergency call, send him up. He was okay. But then we finished that up. We spent 11 hours down there in 120 plus degree temperatures with no air movement, and that was about the worst day I had underground. It was pretty tough.
That sounds terrifying and
Yeah.
terrible and hotter than heck all at the same time.
Right.
However, I feel like maybe in the middle of February when it was -20 out, I would like it for about 10 minutes.
um, yeah, that was an interesting thing when we worked weekends. Grinding all over the mine, all levels. Um, it might be. I remember one morning we showed up for work and it was 40 below in the parking lot. It was just a horrid cold snap in '83, and you go underground, and in the upper levels, the 800, the 1700, things like that, there might be a thin layer of ice on the ditch. They call it the piss ditch, but they've got water running in, and there might be a thin layer of ice up there. I've got a field jacket and everything, trying to stay warm. Just burr. And when you get in the shafts, that's the air intake for the mine. They've got a couple of other shafts that are the exhausts, but that's where it pulls the fresh air in. So that's bringing in, sub-zero air down in there. Oh man, that's cool. But by the time you get down to the 8,000 foot level, it's murderously hot, and now you're just sweating your butt off. And yeah, it was uh, it was special.
Sounds like it.
So we get to see everything, everything from yeah, really cold to really hot, and then back out into the really cold to go back to the dries.
Sure.
Yeah.
So another question that we get often uh, was, were there any funny pranks that stood out to you? I understand that some of these pranks might be, I believe maybe unpublishable is a term we could use, but I feel like it was a brotherhood down there, correct?
Very much so. The first summer I went underground, I worked with speaking of brotherhood, first time I worked underground, I was a partner for part of the summer with Mary. She was one of the first females underground. She was an electrician. And oh, she took a lot of abuse from the miners. There were a lot of guys who said, no, women just don't belong down here. And they behave that way. Um, which as a guy, you learn how to fit in with other guys and stuff like that. When you mention the pranks, oh, there was so much hijinks underground. Now, it wasn't like it was constant. These are hardworking fellows doing their good work and all that stuff, but there's some people, they would suss you out really quick to find out if you were what they called a scary guy. In other words, if you got scared. If you got really scared by something, oh, well, then they're going to make sure you get scared a lot. And just sort of, they just feel you out, see if that was going to happen. And sure enough, they do that. Somebody bring down a Halloween mask and then stand behind a dark car because there's no lights down in the mine. The only light is what's on your forehead. And you come around, you turn a corner, and there's somebody wearing the scream mask, and the scary guys, they just they scream and holler, and everybody chuckles and laughs and has a good time. There were other ones too. There was one guy in the electrical department whose nickname was Stinky because he liked to, he broke wind regularly, and he would save it up for the most improper places. Going down into the mine on the cage, that you call it the cage, not the elevator car. It's the cage. They would jam men in there, miners, so compactly. You would be standing with your chest against somebody's back and their belly against your back, and your arms down by your side. And if your nose itched, you couldn't scratch until you got down the bottom. It was that tight, just shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, and that was that. Well, of course, that's when Stinky would let loose, and everybody just, oh man, and pick on him. Well, somebody, a couple miners, one time he was loose, and they could reach up. They didn't have tools in their hands or something. They could sneak a hand up, and they grabbed a pair of channel locks or vice grips, excuse me, vice grip pliers out of his electrician's pouch of tools on his side. And another electrician standing beside him, they grabbed one out of there and they clamped it onto his mustache. He had a big handlebar mustache, and they clamped a vice grip onto each end of his mustache and dangled it there. Well, that's not fun. But then they made him say, "Are you going to do that again, Stinky?" No. He said, "No, shake your head." And he had to shake his head back and forth. And it was miserable for him. But everybody was pretty delighted, but made for a fun cage ride going down. Um, yeah, these are the kind of things that they would do all the time. Somebody would, we had these old style telephones down there that you would open this metal box, pull out the handset on the end of a cord, put it up to your ear, and you'd holler in the mouthpiece down in the box, sort of like what you'd see in the early 1900s. Yeah, they had a crank, actually had a crank on them. Well, somebody would go and say, "Oh, let's have some fun." And they'd put some nice black grease around the black earpiece that goes to your ear. And they'd hang it up there, and then they'd go back and they would. Sometimes we'd be carrying field phones with us, and we'd go down around the corner and get on there and ring that line a couple times. And because we knew the boss would be standing by it, and he'd pick up the phone because he was expecting a call and jam that grease covered thing into his ear. And everybody'd laugh and holler, hoot and holler. And just all sorts of jokes like that. It was constant.
Yeah, we have heard a lot of them, and those are some really fun ones. We've heard a lot of the different jokes and pranks, and I think a few of them we are choosing not to put in the podcast because they're
One of
fun,
the
but maybe not publishable fun.
one of the more dramatic ones I saw. My partner and I had just finished up, and we were at the 4850 Ross, waiting for the cage. Well, the guys in the shaft are doing work and stuff, so sometimes you put in a cage call, and they might not come for half an hour. Whatever. They've got work to do. So we're sitting there, and if you're sitting there, nothing happening, nothing going on. This is before, we didn't even have cell phones to while away the time and play games with or something. You just sit there. And my partner's getting kind of dozy. Well, just when we hear, about that time we hear a cager put in his cage call, they do these things, and these guys are fast. They go, it sounds like Morse code coming down. And he's telling you where the cage is going to go. He's here. He's going to send it down to the skip pocket down below us, um, which is where all the rock that's in the pockets empties into the skips and gets hauled upstairs to go get crushed and the gold retrieved from it. Um, Well, they're down there doing that all day. On the weekends, they're still emptying rock all the time, hauling it up top. And when they get empty, when the skip is empty, um, then it's time to go back up. So cager puts the skip pocket operator, who's a cager, he puts in a call, and then I hear a little bit later, okay, they're sending the cage down to him. All right, and it's going to come down, and then I hear from the pocket below, and all this is done with these series of little beeps that you put in over the horn. He puts in a blasting call, so there's going to be blasting. What happens is on the weekends, there's nobody in the powder house to check out or check back in powder and stuff. They always bring back a little bit, some the equivalent of dynamite to in case they have a jam, some rock is jammed up or something like that. They'll stick it on a long pole and boom, and blow it up and get the rock flowing again down into the chutes. Well, rather than go up, have to put in a call for them to call out a powder person, wait an hour for or however it takes for him to get there, check in the powder, yeah, and then finally get to go. And it's going to waste an hour or two of his time. And the powder people don't want to do it either, and all. So they'll just they'll just set off that powder. Boom! Now there's nothing to check in. Um, so I hear him put in that call that he's going to do this. Yeah, first of all, we see the cage go by down there. He's down in the pocket. We hear him put in this call. He's going to do some blasting. And my partner can't really, he's not really good at picking up what the signals are. And he's kind of over there almost dozing off. His head's getting pretty heavy. He's no. And I hear this thing go, oh my. Because where we're sitting is right between where the dump is, where they dump the rock into the pocket. And then there's another passage where all the rock from above falls down and joins that to go into this skip pocket. So we're right between the two paths up from there. It's going to get loud. It's going to get loud really quick. So I just watch my partner while I plug my ears. And as soon as the cage starts coming up, boom! And this concussion hits us. It blows his hard hat off. It rolls him off the bench he's sitting on onto the ground. And yeah, he was impressed. He came up out of there white as a ghost, going, ah, ah, ah. He thought, the whole world was caving in. And skip pocket's just, 50 feet or whatever below us. And the cager comes up, he looks smiling at us, sees my partner's reaction. He goes, thought that'd get you. So yeah, even jokes with dynamite. It's fun. It was a fun place to work.
Sounds like you had quite the job back in the day.
Yeah. Again, we were paid on surface. We were paid, surface labor wages. Underground, we're paid underground labor wages, which are the lowest union scale job you had down in the mine. So we're the lowest paid guys down there, but still, it was like 3 times what minimum wage was. We were delighted. It was a fantastic job for the times. Um,
Yeah, and it sounds like this one of your first jobs out of college?
no, actually, that's the job I had during college,
Okay.
and then when I finally graduated college, I got a job out in California with an aerospace company, Hughes Aircraft, and stopped working at the mine. I There wasn't an opening for an engineering job at that time at the at at the mine. So, you know, I was off to go seek my fame and fortune other places, which most college students did. Not most of them didn't end up working at Homestake, but I had yeah 4.5 years there. It was good.
So out of those 4.5 years that you spent working for Homestake, both above and below ground, what would you say was your favorite part of the job?
Oh golly, I think just the amazement factor of it. Um, I started working at Homestake at 18. And so, through my late teens and early 20s, here I am working in this totally otherworldly place. Everything you see for the first time is going to be something, wow, what on earth is that? What are they doing? all that stuff. It was just incredible learning experience. Everything from seeing how the hydroelectric plants work. They were old. They were built in 1911, 1917, that era. But still, it was fascinating. And then going underground. Oh my. Like I said, totally different language down there, different lingo. When you first go down there, they're not sure if you're going to be worth spit. And but then if you work hard and everything, you guys finally say, "Yeah, he's a good partner." And getting called partner was really, you felt good about that all of a sudden, and made you know that you were accepted. And other things, the seeing the different types of mining. When I was down there, they were still mostly doing the old open cut and fill with two miners in day shift, two miners night shift working a stope, blasting down the roof, dragging it out, filling it up with sand, blasting it, continuing to chip their way up. But they had just started some of the new kinds of mining, VCR, vertical crater retreats, some other things, stuff. And these were large with huge yields of rock and stuff. Uh, but you'd end up with some enormous holes in the ground before they backfill them. Sometimes 300 feet, 600 feet deep, in the size of a football field. And you shine your light down in there, you can't see the bottom. Just that's spooky. I remember one of them, we could walk on a catwalk above it, looking down and seeing the this had been a VCR that had finally opened all the way back up, and we could see the load haul dump operating below there, the little front end loader, way down there. You're on top of the height of a skyscraper looking down there, realizing that, man, you could put so many skyscrapers underground there. Just fascinating how the hoists, those miracles of 1930s technology worked. Um, Learning, just from observing the cagers and stuff like that, just all the tricks of operating a 5,000-foot elevator. If you haul something down there, stop the car right at the right level, roll a heavy cart off of there, that thing's going to jump up because it took some of the weight off the cable. So you have to use what they call chairs, lock it in place, different things, all sorts of stuff to keep yourself from getting killed underground.
Yep.
That also is an impressive thing. Realizing that everything we do down here, you can kill yourself if you want, if you don't mind safety. Um, Homestake was getting really, really big into the safety culture back then. Uh, they used to kill several miners a year, but that rapidly dropped in the late 70s, early 80s, so that the death underground was getting to be a rare thing, which is good. That's the right answer. But their safety department was very serious. We had to go through lots of safety training and then refreshers and so on. And everybody hated the safety guy because he'd come down and write things up. But because they did that, things got safer. People didn't die as much. That was good.
Yeah. It sounds like it was a very dangerous job, you know? I can't even imagine you take one step, backwards the wrong way or one step forward the wrong way, in
Oh,
certain parts of the
yeah.
mine, you could be dead, something drops in your head. I mean, the threats and the different things that
Oh,
happen is
yeah.
that.
When I worked on surface crew and stuff, we had to wear hard hats. We all kind of joked, these are pretty useless because we're up in the sunshine and all that stuff. But boy, working underground, my heart, because I'm a taller guy, my hard hats look like crap, particularly in the upper levels where back in those days when you had to drill them out by hand, somebody holding a drill bit, star bit, while the other person swung the sledgehammer. You didn't cut any more rock than you had to. They cut I forget, 1,700 or the 800-foot level. They cut them just big enough for a mule to walk down with its ears not rubbing against the top. Um, the rest of us had to duck, and my hard hat looked like crap, just scratched all the heck, bang, bang. I remember one partner I had on there, Floyd. He'd be walking in front, I'd be following him, and bang, because you're always looking at your feet. You don't want to trip on things. It's muddy, slippery, and all that stuff. Bang, hit my head again. It's going, watch your head. And then he'd laugh, watch your head. Every time I'd bonk my hard hat. And yeah, so everything from just that, you hurt yourself if you're not wearing your hard hat. Safety glasses, things get in your eyes. But then truly dangerous stuff. I mean, the miners, they're dealing with kill you in a second sort of stuff. Blasting, having to bolt up rock, making sure that you're under support rock, nothing peels off. That's where they used to lose a lot of guys, trying to bolt up the rock after they blasted. And yeah, just terribly dangerous stuff.
So, on the note of dangerous, what is the scariest thing that ever happened to you while you were working at Homestake?
Um, like I said, they used to do a lot of work in the shafts on the weekends because there weren't miners down there. Just, a few of us down different doing different things, but very few people down there. And so they would do a lot of shaft maintenance, replacing the runners, the other things, different stuff like that, the pipes in the mine and so on. And to do that, what they would do is take the cage that goes down, which normally has a little peaked roof, like, on the top of it. They would pop those roofs open, put a platform across the top, and make themselves a working platform. And so they'd come down to pick us up, and we go, oh shoot, we get to ride on the top of the cage again, which is just normal. So we'd ride on the top of the cage, and because they were working on the top of the cage, they limited their speed to half speed, which is still a good clip. When I was down there, when I was working there, the Ross and the H shaft from the surface to the 4850 was about a 2 minute ride. So you're doing a mile in 2 minutes, about a 30 mile an hour average speed. That's quick. Um, Rattling down that shaft, the guides sometimes aren't as straight as you could, and you're shaking back and forth and all that stuff in there. That's impressive. But then when you're standing on the work platform on the roof, essentially, um, you're going up only at 15 miles an hour, which still seems awfully fast, and it's rattling back and forth a little bit. And we had stuff to carry in our hands. Well, as if so we're standing there trying to keep your balance. And one time I remember suddenly going, oh, and I'm falling backwards. And I'm thinking, I got to throw this stuff or something. Or I was going to fall off the shaft. And one of the cagers happened to notice me. This older guy reached over, grabbed my bib overalls, pulled me back in. No big deal. But my heart went into my throat for a minute there because I was falling backwards. And, with a few thousand feet below you, that's going to be kind of a special feeling for a while.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, that was just a really small moment of being terrified. And then suddenly I'm back to normal. And but my heart was pounding.
I'm I'm sure that sounds terrifying. I had
Yeah.
a similar experience. I was in an abandoned mine with the owner, of course, and I was wearing a hoodie, and that hoodie saved my life. Uh,
Well,
we were inside this drift, and they had a hoist going down inside of this drift, and for some reason, I felt impelled to lean over this old wooden railing, not thinking that it was 100+ years old at this point in time.
yeah.
The railing gave in and fell, and I remember the owner just reaching, he grabbed my hoodie, like, the hood of my hoodie, and pulled
Oh,
it back. And I said, "How deep does that go?" And he goes, "The School of Mines trains here, and they haven't
yeah.
been to the bottom. That's how deep that is."
Oh
And
no.
I said, "Yeah, I have a new guardian angel." Uh, so from that day on out, if I'm exploring the mine, I always wear a hoodie on me because I feel like, it's not like a safety rope, but you know,
Well,
last ditch effort. So,
man.
well, one of the last questions, looks like we have a few minutes here left to wrap up, but one of my last questions, if you could go back in time to any day in Homestake history, what day would it be?
Homestake history?
Like if you could go back in any time in Homestake's history, in any of its years, what year or what day would you go back and what would you want to see? Just give us a quick little answer to that.
Boy, I don't know. I think it would have been. there's yeah, again, try to pick one of so many things. Um, it would have been fun to see the two guys who found the lead and started developing it before they sold it to the Hearst, and just tell them, you know how big this is going to be someday. But of course, you can't do that. But yeah, that would have been something.
Yeah, Lead has just become the such of a cool town. Like, I mean, it's
Hmm.
such a neat town, and to see it prospering still, of course,
Yeah,
not,
we were so worried that it was going to dry up and go away.
yeah, of course, it's not that footprint that was when it was Homestake, but to
Hmm.
see it today and still thriving,
Hmm.
that's something.
That's really
We see a lot of company towns and a lot of mining towns boom and bust out here in the Black Hills. So to see Leeds' success and hear the
yeah.
stories of Leeds' success,
Well,
is
you must get that feeling a lot going into all these old mines back when Homestake was just one of so many mines being tried in the gold rush days. What was it like back then? Thank you for running your channel so that we all get a little feeling of that.
yeah,
Um,
no, hey, you're welcome. And that's a question I
yeah,
get posed a lot. And I feel like that's an answer that would take longer than 2 hours to answer. But every single mine, every single cabin, every single ghost town we enter, that's always a question that's in the back of our mind is what was it like to live here? What was it like to work in this mine? What was it like back in the day? Even today, we were standing inside of what used to be an assayer office and, in the 1880s, 1890s. And
hmm,
half of the walls were missing, but the front door was up and the window was still there intact, and the wallpaper was still on the walls, and the wooden floor was still there. And I just stood inside of it looking around and asking my crew, I'm like, what do you guys think it was like back then? And right next
different.
to this assayer office was a large mill that's now gone. So I was
Yeah,
like, you can only assume how loud it was going to be and how crazy busy it was. It's just there's so
yeah,
many questions I wish I could pose. And often I find myself writing these questions down because I feel like someday I'll be able to answer them somehow through education and research.
yeah.
But you know, it's in the back of our minds. That's a question we always pose. But thank you so much for joining us here on the
You're
podcast.
welcome.
That's the reality of the daily grind, the technical and physical toll that most of us only ever imagine. But the mind wasn't just a place of labor, it was a place of constant change. That brings us to Dennis, who saw a completely different side of the evolution of the homestake mining operation. Welcome to the show, Dennis, and thank you so much, Dennis, for joining us here on the podcast.
You bet.
So, you were a miner at the homestay, correct? Could you tell us a
I
little bit about
was
that?
for 27 and a half years.
What was your main job as a miner?
I was for 18 of them years, I was a contract miner, and I was I stoped for a little while, but I mainly drove drifts. And I was a highball drifter. When I very first started out, when I was 19 years old, I was a highball drifter for a little while on the 8,000. Basically, the 8,000 was just getting started. And then my dad, who worked at the mine before and then came back, and me and him went together, and we drifted for another 10 years together all over the mine.
So, for our audience who may not be on the up with all the mining terms, what does stoping mean?
Stoping is a great big open chamber, open fill, or cavern that opened up and you dropped your back. As you're mining, you drop your back, pull your rock out, and then drop another back, and you did it from one level to the next. And they could range from small stopes to massive stopes. Um, so that's what a stoper was. They had three kinds of stopes. They had timber stope, they had open cut and fill, and then they had a shrink. A shrink is what you did. You kept on dropping your rock, and then you just ride your pile down as they pulled it. And timber stope is where they had really loose rock, bad rock, and they would stand timber and then as they kept on going up to kind of hold control the ground.
Interesting.
Open cut and fill was that you just dropped your back, pulled your rock, and then they filled it up to a certain point with the sand, and then you started right off again off the sand pile.
Okay. So you mentioned that you worked in the 8,000-foot level. We receive a lot of questions on Facebook when we post about the homestake, and there's always folks who are asking about the 8,000-foot level to be exact. So we have been told it was very hot down there. What was it like working 8,000 feet underground?
Well, I have to say it was kind of cool. I thought it was kind of cool, but it was not cool rock temperature. It was like, well, they always said the rock temperature was like 140 degrees. And when you stood in the water, if you hit a water course down there, which you would now and then, that water would burn you. It was that hot. It's like, and then at the face, at the face of the drift, there would be water standing, and you wear insulated boots because the water was so hot. But as you, they have it, you'd have a cooler. We call them. There were coolers behind us, so to bring the temperature down. But it was still, you know, 80, 90, 100 degrees and 100% humidity. It was very hot.
That sounds pretty brutal, but I'm sure maybe in the darkest days of winter, it was kind of a nice escape from the negative 20 degrees that we see in February.
Exactly, because I live about, see, 4 blocks from the mine, and you'd walk to work when it was below zero, and the mine was a constant temperature. So when you walk to work below zero, you're glad to get down there.
Sure. So when we were first emailing, we were talking about how your dad and you worked together. What was your father's position at the mine?
He was a drifter just like me. And when he was a drifter years ago, he worked from like in the early late 50s to probably the mid 60s. And then he decided it was time to go move on. So he went to work for the state for a while, and then he come back in the sort of the late 70s. And then when he come back to work, me and him just went together and started drifting again. He
It's
was a
kind of
very
fun.
good drifter.
It's kind of fun that you got to work with your dad side by side a lot like that.
Well, short story on that one is, yeah, it was great. It turned out to be really good. You know, there was times that we didn't get along very good. My dad was you did it kind of a guy that you did it his way or the only way, but that was all right because he taught me very well. We did very good on our drifting. We were probably one of the better drift crews in the mine. I'm not bragging. There was a lot of good drift crews in the mine, but we always made very good. We had good footage, and we uh, did very well at it.
Amazing. So on episode 4 of our podcast, we got to sit down with Aaron, who is a co-author in the Price of Gold book. Um, Not sure if you've heard of that book or read it, but it is an awesome book. Definitely recommend picking it up. But Erin had a bunch of stories in her book about, everything from serious to funny. And that brings us to the main question that we have. What was the funniest, or what's the funniest story you have that happened to you while working underground?
Let me try to think of some of them. When I was working, I wasn't actually underground that day. I was working in the yard, but anyway, trying to get some rock bolts and stuff down for us. And it was called the sawmill crew, and that's where they loaded all the stuff to put down on the ground. Anyway, I was out there working, and I was kind of late for lunch going in the shop there, and everybody's sitting around in the circle having lunch, and I walk in. I kind of noticed they're kind of looking at me, and all of a sudden I have this lunchbox, like a Playmore cooler lunchbox, where it flips open, and when it flipped open, they put a blackbird in there they caught, and that blackbird come right out, hooked me in the nose, and was flopping me and the cheeks beating the heck out of me. It scared the horrid little crud out of me. I jumped over the saw, and everybody just, I still see people on the street that know that were either there or know about it. They still talk about it. It was quite the deal.
Sounds kind of like there's a lot of tricks and jokes that happened down there. We've heard that
constantly.
we've heard it was kind of like a brotherhood when you were
Yeah,
working around.
it was constant. And going down, coming up in the end of shift, that's a lot of horseplay on the cage. There was a lot of stuff going on.
We've heard a lot of stories, and I think, to quote our friend Erin, who's also the co-author of The Price of Gold, she said a lot of those funny stories are unpublishable for a reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
So
was the mine had its own culture, that's for sure.
definitely, I mean, you're underground for how many hours a day?
Well, when I was highballing, it was 12, but uh, underground 8 hours a day. I was straight with when I wasn't highball drifting, I was 8 hours a day. But when we were on the 8,000, it was 12 hours.
That's an incredible amount of time in 100-degree temp.
Yeah, and when you come up from the shaft in the dead of winter, it was brutal cold. You come from brutal heat to brutal cold.
No in between there. So, speaking of the cage, walk us through that. So, you walk into work, you get onto the cage. What does that look like?
The cage is it's just like an oversized elevator, except it just didn't have a door like an elevator. It had just a roll down door, and it was wet, and it was noisy, and it was fast. When the mine was going, you drop 4,800 feet the cage would go around 25 to 30 miles an hour going down. So you go past the stations. Every station was a station at 150 feet. There was just a flash. It was going that fast. Coming up was the same way. So, and when my very first time on the cage, it didn't really scare me, but I just kind of wondered if it was going to stop, because it was going so fast. But it's dark and loaded with 32 men.
What was the time frame that you were on this cage from, the top to the 8,000 foot level?
Oh, probably 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes. No, not even 5 minutes. Probably 4 minutes or so, right around in there. If they go from straight down to the 4850, about that. But sometimes they'd be stopping at other levels on the way down. But if it was a straight shot, it didn't take very long.
Yeah, we heard that the 4850 level, and we've talked to quite a few miners now. We've heard that the 4850 level is kind of the main thoroughfare, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of activity that happened on that level.
yeah. It was a main tramway, trolley way for the rock, and then there was a collar for four winds and six shaft. That's the two underground shafts. So yeah, so it was a main for the lower levels. That was the start of the lower levels. You get to the 4850, then you got to the other shafts that went down deeper.
Okay, interesting. I just can't imagine personally working 12 hours underground. That's just a crazy thought to me.
Yeah, but when you're a kid out of high school and when you start making good money, it just turned into be an everyday deal. It was just what you did.
Yeah, so you got used to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I look forward to it every day. I still get to go underground because I work for the city elite, and I go underground because of the lab.
okay. Well, we've been planting our seed with Sanford, trying to pitch our shot to maybe go underground, and we're trying our luck at it.
Well, good luck. They don't. It takes a little bit to get down there. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's what we've heard.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of put a post out there on our Facebook page, as you saw, and they were looking, we were looking for questions from folks on Facebook that they had for you. And one of the questions, one of the most popular questions was, what would you say is the scariest thing that happened to you underground?
Well, there's a few of them, but the one that's probably scared the most out of me is they used to have what they call blast holes with the tram area for they had diesel muckers and they would muck their rock out of there, and they had some missed holes up in there. They had a ring drill, and that's what they would blast. Well, they had some missed holes. The missed holes are where the powder didn't go off. So I'm up there and I'm going to try to get rewire them wires and stuff. And I could hear it's a great big open area. You could hear it working. You could see some rock working, and it decided it was going to come down. And there was the big loader was sitting there, and I crawled underneath that loader, and the rock, and it buried me. And it took them like a half hour to get me out of there. Actually, they actually called the top. The surface had told them that I was gone. So they had the union coming and everything else coming. And because they called it a fatality at that moment, they got me out of there. They were hauling me out. I didn't come to until I got to the surface, to the hospital. I wasn't dead, thank God, but it beat me up really good. And that was probably the scariest one. When something like that does happen, you know, you always hear the saying where your life flashes in front of you when it's happening. Well, it does, because it took a while for it to get me buried, and so and it knocked me out, but I knew it took a while. So that was the scariest one.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I'm sure you had a few other scary close calls, and I'm glad you're still with us and here to tell the stories about it. All right, I'm going through the questions here. Another question we got is ask them what high grading lunchbox special was.
Well, everybody thought maybe they were coming out with a little bit of high grade when you're mining. You could hit some high grade. You might, there's pretty good ore, and so guy, if they see a hunk of little rock or something with a piece of a little flicker of gold in there, they'd probably jump it in their lunchbox. But that little hunk of gold was probably not worth you know $2 or a hunk of rock, but it wasn't probably worth $2. But either way, I got a piece of core that I got that's got a little bit of high grade in it, but it's worthless really in a way. But yeah, that's what they did. This people would just see a hunk of high grade and they just put it in their lunchbox and come home with it.
Sure. So, another question. So, you said you loved your job. What was your favorite thing about mining? Like, when you look back at that, what would you say you enjoyed the most about mining?
Well, there's a lot of things I enjoyed. The work was tough, but I enjoyed doing it because when you got paid very well to do it, and but of all the guys that I ever knew down there, every one of them I just enjoyed being around. That's the thing. Probably one of the things I miss the most about working at the homestake is the people that you got to know and work with. They were all amazing people. You very rarely run into anybody you couldn't get along with. They are all in the same boat with you. They're down in the mine. They're taking care of each other, and it was just, I guess, sort of a brotherhood. I guess a lot of the old guys, when you go down there and you're a new greenhorn, the old guys knew you was a greenhorn, but they took you and they taught you what to do, and then you turned out to be a pretty good miner.
Huh. Yeah, I suppose I'm just imagining myself riding down in the cage day one. I think I'd be picked on, and I'm not sure if I would make it to the first hour.
Well, there was a, I we were there. One guy I went down the cage with this one day, and that's how fast it was going and stuff. You could tell he's a greenhorn. He's got his new hat on and all the other stuff. And he got to the bottom, everybody's going out, and he didn't get off. He said, "That's enough. I'm going." He went back up. He didn't last but one ride down.
Well, mining's not for everyone, right?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, another question that was submitted to us is, oh, we're supposed to ask miners, did you have any interactions with paranormal?
Well, I think they're there.
Okay. Yeah.
And uh, they always say ghosts come back where they're most happy. But I was walking down the drift one day with a boss. It was like I think it was on the 1700, and we're going along, and he's kind of a cool boss. We're going along, and all of a sudden he just comes to a dead stop. There's a crosscut, and what a crosscut is the main level drift, and then the crosscut goes off to the side. And he comes to a dead stop, and he comes a step back, and he says, "You see that?" And I said, "Well, it's just a dead end drift." He says, "No, look at that. In going in there, there's track. There's a old track line, but it had sand in the middle, and there's footprints going in, but there's not footprints coming out. And there's no way out of that drift. You had to come back out. So you explain how come there's footprints going in, but none coming out."
Uh-huh. That is spooky.
Yeah, there's a couple of I worked with an old guy one day a couple times, and we were going up for sitting on sill and having lunch. And sometimes when maybe you got loaded out, your ground's loaded or something, you eat your lunch and just shut your light off and take a 15-minute nap. And that old guy wouldn't shut his light off. I said, I think his name was Norm, if I remember right. Norm, shut your light off. He said, no, no, no. He says, I don't shut my light off. He says, there's ghosts down here. I've seen them and I don't shut my light off. He said,
Oh, I'm sure that could have led to some funny jokes and tricks.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It could be, some of them weren't, well, yeah, you don't want to tell in public. That's for sure.
Yeah, like we said before, some of these are, uh, not appropriate, and we'll keep it that way. Unpublishable. That's the word,
Yeah.
unpublishable. All right, another question that we had, it looks like from a viewer named Tony. He said, ask him how much pay was back then.
When I started out, it was 275 an hour. And then as and then there's 275 an hour. And then when you went contract, if you was a contract miner, it depends how much you make, but say if you get your hourly pay and say you make $50 a day over, then you got your hourly pay plus $50 more for that day. And some guys would make 50 over, some guys would make 100 over. Every once in a while, you might make even a little bit more than that. So, whatever your day's pay was plus your contract.
Huh, interesting. Well, I mean, that sounds like okay pay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
And
it was good money. It was really good money for a kid out of high school and in the 70s. If you was a contract miner, you was doing pretty good.
yeah, what was growing up in Lead like? Because you grew up in Lead, correct?
Yep, lifetime. It was amazing. It was probably, I think it was around 9,000 people. The school, we had amazing. Our high school was a lot of people. We won Black Hills National Championships 4 or 5 years in a row, went to state basketball tournaments 4 or 5 years in a row. We had free rec center. Um, we had 3 or 4 ball fields. It was everything you wanted in the city. Homestake would take care of everybody, no matter if you worked there or not. Most of the time, they just took care of everybody that lived in Lead, and it was great. It was I can't imagine living anywhere else, to tell you the truth. There was all kinds of we had like 4 or 5 neighborhood grocery stores and 4 or 5 other stores, and it was really cool.
Yeah, I feel like Lead is a very special place. And you look at it now and you hear the stories of what it was like back then. And it's so amazing to think about. It was just a well knit, put together community, which it still is today. But it's fun to hear about the memories in the past that make Lead what it is today.
Yes, yes, it was a true company town, that's for sure. There was no doubts about that. But the company took care of the town too.
Yeah, and it's cool that Lead has a success story. At History Below the Pines, we talk a lot about ghost towns, and we have visited quite a few company towns that had very successful mines at them that failed, and now they are just complete ghost towns. And
Yeah,
you'll just find them in a page of a history book, and that's it. So it's
Yeah,
nice to see a physical town like Lead.
yeah, and I've been here all my life, and I've seen the ups and the downs. When Homestake closed down, it was like you thought it was going to be the end of the world, but it's coming. Homestake is, I mean, Lead has fought back, and now they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, no, we were up in Lead just the other day and spoke with a few different individuals just walking the streets, and it was super fun. Great folks up there, great people, great businesses. Were you at Homestake the day it closed?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, no, they moved some rock for another year afterwards. I was uh on Christmas Eve 2000 was my last day. Try to figure that one was a little scary because you're walking home on Christmas Eve wondering what you're going to do next.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. You worked there for so many years and to just be done all of a sudden for that switch to turn off.
Yeah. Yep.
The
And
shock.
but I've decided to. I have to say I probably knew it was coming a long time before it did, and so I kind of prepared myself a little bit, and I owned it. I mean, made sure my house was paid for. Well, while I was contract mining, I paid my house off anyway, and my wife was smart enough to say that this is going to happen someday. So we decided just to. I was going to go to school, and I decided not to do that, and so I decided I'm just going to stay here and figure it out, and I did. I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and you're still in Lead today. What do you do for work now?
I'm a building inspector for the city of Lead.
Okay, that sounds like an interesting job.
You know, it turned out to be that way, yes.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast, and thank you for sharing some of your stories and memories,
You
both
bet.
the good and the bad. It's very interesting, and you lived quite the life, and you had quite the job. So thank you for sharing that with us.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, for sharing and for the awesome conversation. This gives us some insight as to what life was like below the surface in the Homestake Mine so many years ago. But we have one more person we are sitting down with, and that is going to be with our friend Clyde. And Clyde is going to tell us all about his experience underground at the Homestake Mine and even recall some stories that he has from the golden days of mining back in the day. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Clyde, and we are so happy you're here to join us. Well, thank you, Clyde, for jumping on the podcast here with us. So you
Yep.
worked at Homestake, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. I started in February of 1973, and I worked for Homestake for approximately 46 years. I retired in around 2019. I continued working for Homestake after they closed the mine in Central City and stuff, where they have their water treatment plant and things. So I started in the mine department as a laborer. And then I worked in the mine department for about 5 months. After my second trip to the Homestake Hospital in a stretcher, I decided that working for the mine as a miner was not for me. So I got a job working on the crushers as a cleanup man. And from there, I worked around the shafts for not quite 3 years. Then you got to know the way Homestake worked was you had to have seniority to bid on some of these jobs. So it took me a few years, and after enough time, I had enough seniority. I got an electrician's helper job in the mine. So then I worked as an electrician for not quite 4 years till 1980. Then things changed, and I decided I went to the mechanical department as a welder's apprentice. And I stayed in the mechanical department until 1998. Then they had a job came up. It was called a super tech, and that was you worked on everything. You were like a first responder for something broken at the mine, anywhere. And so they would call you would we worked shifts. They would call you, and you would go assess what was wrong, and if you could fix it, you fixed it. If you couldn't, you knew the right people to call. And I worked in that capacity until I retired. So my jobs that I had got me all over the mine, everywhere. I went from everything, most everything on the surface, and then everything all over in the mine doing different things. So that's kind of the history.
Wow. It sounds like you kind of worked the entire mine then.
I did. It's such an awesome place, it wasn't all good, there were bad days, but
Sure, I feel like there's good and bad to every job and every career, right?
yeah, yeah. So
So
anyway, that
out of all those jobs that you worked at the Homestake, what would you say was your favorite?
the maintenance tech, the last one, because I had the background for the electrician, uh, from being in the electrical department, and then I had the background in the mechanical department, work welding, fabricating, and working. Uh, Whenever they had big projects that needed all the more than one skills, they would combine crews, and you would go work on things. And so you got exposed to working on pumps. You got exposed to working on high power electrical problems and things like that. Worked on the hoists. Worked on just pretty much everything.
Yeah,
So
and
the best,
those hoists that you worked on, those were quite large. I don't feel like our audience sometimes can grasp how large those hoists truly were. I mean,
oh
I've
yeah,
seen photos of them packing, in the early days, packing 30 to 60 men in those, cages going down.
yeah. The I believe the Ross cage capacity was, I don't remember positively, it was either 32 or 36. And I worked on the cage as a cager at one point. So then hoisting and lowering men was part of your job. You would load the cage every morning, lower them, or every night shift, whichever, and then lower them down to their respective levels, and then at the end of the shift, hoist them back up. You know,
I bet
so
that was I bet that was a stressful job.
not really. It wasn't that bad. It was entertaining most of the time. The miners are the most entertaining people in the world. You gotta once you get to know them.
Sure. And that brings us to our next question. We have spoken with a lot of different homestake employees and past miners. We even spoke with a past electrician. So you are our second electrician we've spoke with now. But they all said the same thing. That was kind of a brotherhood and that the job was full of both seriousness and some tomfoolery. Uh,
Oh
we've
yeah.
heard of some great pranks. Was there any good pranks that you fell for?
Oh, for me, not so much me. I'm trying to think of uh, ones I pulled on other people, but uh, I'm sure. Off the top of my head, I don't remember any real major ones. I suppose those are the kinds of ones that if there weren't really any that really stuck out. So you know, uh, the ones that got pulled on me weren't so bad.
We've heard good ones and bad ones. Some of them we're able to put on the podcast, and some, let's just say,
We're not.
we're not.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
working underground, did you get to go down to the 8,000-foot level? What was your feeling like when you were underground? Was it tough to work underground in those conditions?
I guess, uh, you know, after your first couple days of working in the underground, you kind of get used to it, and that kind of goes to the back of your mind. Once I started working on the 3950 level as a laborer, mucking the ditch. I'm sure you've heard that. So, but anyway, after it seems like it didn't take that long to get used to going underground and everything. So then when the time came, I was an electrician the first time I went to the 8,000 foot level. It was, it was the bad part was it was so hot down there. The heat was immense. You just don't realize how hot it gets down there with the humidity and everything. There were times when you could only work in those conditions for 10, 15 minutes. And then you would have to go someplace where you had cool air to cool down. And after working in that heat, your brain doesn't want to function as well either. So your thinking capacity diminishes the longer you stay in the heat.
Sure. And we spoke with a gentleman named John, who told us the same thing. He said it was about 12 to 15 minutes. You'd go under some cold water and you'd get back to work. Um,
Yep.
so sounds like a very tough job. Couldn't even
Yep.
imagine it. I will say I did mention to John, I'm sure for the first, 5 minutes, in the dead of February, I would enjoy the heat down there. But after 5 minutes, if I could take it.
Yeah. One of the hard things when you say in the dead of February is you go down there and get really hot, all sweaty, soaked to the bone, and then the shift would end and you would come up. And uh, I know like the Ross shaft is an updraft or is a downdraft. So the air coming down the shaft is the winter cold air. And so when you come up out of the mine and you're soaked to the bone, uh, those few minutes on that cage ride up are very cold.
Oh,
you
I'm
know,
sure. And how long was that cage ride, would you say?
oh, most of the time, if you came up from the 4850, which is, I think that's the main level for the mine now, but from the 4850, that was about 4 to 5 minute ride, you know. Uh, but you had to ride to come up out of the bottom of the mine. You had two choices. There were two larger shafts that went further down in the mine, Four Winds and Six Shaft. And Six Shaft was the deepest one. It went to the 8,000 foot level. Actually, Six Shaft went down about 8,200 feet. There was pumps and stuff at the bottom of the shaft and a skip pocket down below the 8,000 foot level where they loaded the ore and hauled it up. So you would come up the Six Shaft, get off the cage, and you could walk uh, around we just called it around the corner to the raw shaft, and then there you would get picked up and hauled to the surface. 48 was still cool on the station, but once you got away from it, it wasn't. But that ride up was pretty cold. There
Oh,
were
I'm
times
sure.
in the winter, the metal on the surface station would get so cold if you had moisture on your boots, it felt like you had sticky because the water was instantly freezing to the metal as you were walking across it.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a very cold ride and made you question your job and why you were working there for a few minutes.
Oh yeah, some days, but it was like a lot of things. When you worked on something and then got it going. For me, the miners when they would mine and stuff, I'm sure that they got pride in making doing their tunnels and drilling and blasting the ore and stuff. And for the fix it guys, our jobs were to get things going and maintain things. So when we got something running again that was broke, that was our objective and stuff. So
Sure, definitely. So, what would you say, was your favorite part of the entire job?
Uh, the favorite part of my job, I think, I had, let's see, was that I could go home at the end of the day. It provided the my favorite thing of the job was that it provided a living for raising a family. And beyond that, at work, uh, just I liked learning new things all the time. It was my favorite thing was not every day for me, not every day was the same. Every day was something different. Of all the things, uh, it didn't get monotonous. Every day was something new. And if you didn't like what you were doing, the mine was a plenty big enough place you could move on to something else and try something else and learn something new there. And I guess when I think about it, probably every day was different for me.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I feel like the mine supported so many different jobs and taught so many skills that, were more valuable than money, I'm sure. Um,
Oh yeah.
when it came to hands-on skills and learning how to live life. The mine
Uh,
was an important chapter in Leeds history for sure.
yeah. I
So
when I
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, when I they were great at teaching you. They were, always when I went to the electrical department, they provided I could take an ICS course on electricity, a 4-year course. And so I did that. And then when I went to the mechanical department, metal fab shop as a welder's apprentice, I did a 4-year apprenticeship welding. And then even when I went to be a maintenance tech, they would provide we'd have classes and they would teach us about some of the newer stuff that we were going to be working on, and all those things. So they were really good about teaching you how to do your job.
It sounds like you kind of went to tech school at the mine there.
Oh, I did. Yeah, it's carried with me uh you know all these years. I always considered myself, they call me up and get the fix it guy.
Yeah, and I'm sure being an electrician, you got to see some of the old workings in the mine.
I did. The horse barns, there were some horse barns on the 1100. Uh, I don't know if you're familiar with, in Lead, there's a B&M shaft. Got to go to the bottom of that I think it was the 1100 one time. When I went to be an electrician's apprentice or helper, the fellow I worked with, I don't know if you would, his name was Floyd Hilden, and he was the best. Could not say enough. When he take, we went to all these different places, and one of them, the went through the 1100, went by the horse barns, went to the B&M where they had the old mechanical start and stops for their pumps back there. In later years, they turned those pumps off and didn't run power to them anymore. But they were like a tank, and it would fill up, and the old ball floats and chains would turn the pumps on and off and things like that. It was, the so in the upper levels, the 800-foot level was their major uh, powder storage level. The 300-foot level is the one that it comes out in Kirk. And they used to unload the powder when I first started working at the mine. Used to unload the powder in Kirk and then bring it in on that tunnel and then take it from the 300 to the 800 to their storage area. And then during the week, when all the levels needed powder, then they would distribute it later in the week to all the other levels in the mine.
Huh,
So
that's interesting.
that was
I just drove by the road to Kirk the other day, and I actually mentioned to someone, I said, I've never been down that road before. I wonder what's down there. So you kind of just answered that question for me.
Oh, yeah. And then you passed over well, there's two bridges, pipelines. One is not being used and one is still being used. And those pipelines, that one pipeline goes in on the 300-foot level and then goes up to what they call the tramway. And then from the tramway, it goes, feeds from there up and feeds water down to the water treatment plant. Homestake, or Barrick now, still pumps water from Grizzly Gulch impound down that one pipeline into the 300, goes up and feeds down to the water treatment plant. They use that water, that's cold water. They add it with the water out of the mine to cool their mine water and to bring it up to a level that's releasable to the creek.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose the creek has to go through certain,
It,
safety
it,
precautions and whatnot.
all the water has to be tested and treated before and meet EPA standards before it can be released. But that's
Yeah, we get into the bushes there.
yeah.
But
But anyway, that 300-foot level there is a bulkhead there, and the track comes right out to the end of the bulkhead, and that's where they would push the cars and they would load the powder on the cars and then take them into the mine on the raw side and and then distribute the powder from there. I don't know if anybody ever told you, but and that was me. I didn't understand it at first. There's two sides to the mine, the Ross and the Yates. And when the mine was going all the time, you very seldom saw the people that worked over at the Yates if you worked at the Ross. It was like two different worlds. At the first few years I worked there, I never knew any of the people that worked at the Yates because they all it was you never saw them because they were two separate sites unless you crossed paths in the mine.
huh. Yeah, it's crazy to imagine how many, I feel like if you're going to Terry Peak or if you're visiting the town of Lead, you're just sitting on top of the anthill. It's crazy to think about all the drifts and shafts that are under your feet that connect
Yeah,
all over the place. I don't know how
the
you guys
visit
have track of it. I feel like, you guys talk about going to this level and connecting to this level in the main thoroughfare. I think I'd be
yeah.
lost in the first 2 minutes.
The first time I climbed from one level to the next, the my I was I climbed down from the 3950 level to the 4100 level, and you get disoriented. Which way do I go? you know, because I was supposed to climb from one level to the other and then find the motorman, and walked around for about a half an hour till I think he more found me than I found him.
Yeah, I'm sure it was quite the job working underground there.
It was awesome. Uh, some of the other things, they had an incline that went from the 4100 to the 47, and just the last year or the first year I was electrician helper, I got to ride on that once, and then they were in the process of shutting that down.
And Clyde,
That
for
was
our,
a
for our viewers and audience, when you speak of the incline, what is an incline? Because I know there's some folks who are listening who probably are unfamiliar with the mining terms.
okay. It was a tunnel that slowly went down at a pretty steep angle. And the one I'm talking about went from the 4,100-foot level, I think, to the approximately the 45 or the 4,700-foot level. So about a 700-foot long, 700-foot long tunnel that went at about I don't know, at least a 30-degree angle. And you kind of lean back and rode in the cars, at an angle, and it would take the miners to the different levels along there. If you go to the visitor center, I don't know if that's on there. Have you been in the visitor center?
Yes, we have. It's a great spot, very educational.
They have all the mock-up of a lot of the levels in the mine. I don't believe that one's on there, but that was an awakening for me riding. That was an experience riding. That was a little scary at first because you take off. It's kind of like riding a giant roller coaster, only slow. It drops off and goes, and it's in the dark. So the only light you have is your light.
It was a theme park before theme parks.
Yeah, it was.
So you mentioned scary. Was there any, scary moments during work that stood out to you? Do you have any stories?
Oh, yeah, I saw that you posted, ask a miner a question about scary moments, and I was telling my wife that, and I thought, well, the scariest one for me was the second time I got hurt in the mine. When I first started working there, I got pinned between a timber and a machine, a mucker. I was cleaning sand out from underneath a chute, and the muckers have a step that you ride on. So when it moves, you move. Well, to get past a post, you have to take the step off. So I took the step off, and I was walking alongside the mucker, and it jumped off the tracks and pinned me between the post and the mucker. And I couldn't get free, and I was stuck there for about 5-10 minutes. And finally, the only way to get me free was to run the machine backwards and unpin me, and when they did that, I'd been pinched for so long that my legs had lost all their feeling. I just dropped to the ground. They put me in a stretcher and hoisted me up and took me to the Homestake Hospital and put me in a bed. And it took about 20 hours to get the feeling back in my legs so I could move them. And that was probably the scariest time I ever had.
That's terrifying. So was there obviously there was a mine safety or a mine rescue team that would come to your aid if you needed it?
Oh, they had that, but those were for the accidents and stuff. That was just the people that you worked with.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you waited for them to get the mine rescue team together and stuff, that would take hours. The miners had to be their own best rescuers, so to speak, because there was no to go get help was usually not that it would take too long,
Sure.
So now
Yeah.
I can tell you the funny story about. I told you there was two reasons I quit working in the mine department. That last incident was the second time I got carried out of the mine on a stretcher. About a month and a half before that, I was being what they called a student miner. You were learning how to run the drills and everything, and I was drilling the rock overhead. It called the back, and the drill steel broke, came down and hit me right between the eyes and cut me and knocked me down. And I found out there's an artery in between your eyes, and I'm laying there watching the blood squirt out. You probably can't tell people that, but anyway, so the other guys I'm working with, they run over and put a big rag on it, and they're holding it, and they wouldn't let me walk out of the stope. We were about 50 feet below the track level. So they put you in one of the old Homestake wire stretchers and hoist you up out of there and then haul you out. And this was during the daytime in the morning. And the Homestake Hospital was right on Lead Main Street across from what was the bank. And the Homestake had their own ambulance. And the ambulance pulls up. And of course, they used the miners to carry the stretcher even to the hospital. And so they pull up, open the doors, and they pull the stretcher out, and I'm laying on the stretcher, and there's two little old ladies on the sidewalk, and one of them says, "Oh my God, he's dead," you know. I yelled, "No, I'm not dead, lady, just covered with blood," you know.
Oh
Oh,
man.
so
Well, you lived quite the life. We have a few minutes here left, but our closing question that we like to ask everyone is if you could go back to any moment in Homestake's history, what would you want to see?
uh, I'd really like to have seen when they were doing when they had the animals and stuff were actually in the horse barns and stuff in the mine. Because I got to go see where they kept them, the masonry, the entrances to the where the horse barns were and stuff were absolutely phenomenal. The history of the homestake workers, they did fantastic work. And so, but always would have liked to seen when they had the animals in the barns and stuff, and see how that went. That would have that I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah, I'm sure it was super cool to see that barn area and kind of see some history. I
Mhm.
think I would like to really see, I would like to go take a tour of the mills. Like,
Oh yeah.
take me back to when the stamp mills were running. I'm sure it was
Oh
loud. But I want to see it. I want to take a tour. I want to see the full surface and then take me under, put me in the cage and
yeah
I want to go down. I want to experience the levels. Not sure if I
yeah
want to go down to the 8,000 foot level, but take me
mm,
down to the 4,850.
yeah.
Take
Well
me down to 5,000. I want to walk the drifts and see some of the main shafts,
yeah,
especially in the main mining era,
yeah
when the men were busier than busy.
yeah. That's awesome. The mine had so many places to go. And then when I got to be a maintenance tech, I found out that there was a whole nother world on the surface that Homestake had. All their water intake systems. Have you ever explored any of that?
I've heard of them and I've seen some of them, but other than that, no.
The city of Lead runs off of their water supply system is the old Homestake water supply. The Homestake collects water from out by Inglewood, and it's gravity fed all the way to Lead. It's an awesome system.
Yeah.
And then their hydroelectric plants, they had three of them. They had one in Inglewood, and then two in Spearfish Canyon.
Okay. Yeah. One of them is in the news recently. I believe it was turned over locally
That,
to a society of sorts.
yep, that was Hydro Two,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that's by Cleo. They call it Cleopatra now. And they made them change the name here a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I know
But
what you're referencing there. So, well, hey, thank you so much, Clyde. It looks like we're running out of time, but thank you for
oh,
coming on to the podcast and thank you for sharing your stories and some homestake history. Well, there it is. Thank you, Clyde, for sharing your story with us and showing us what life looked like working below the surface and walking us through some of your memories and stories from the homestake. It's much appreciated and it is all part of keeping the homestake's history alive today. So thank you. John, Dennis, and Clyde. Three men, three different paths, but one shared story. Looking back at their experiences, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe. They didn't just work in the mine, they helped build the foundation of our very identity. They were the architects of an era that defined this region one shift at a time. Thank you to our guests for sharing these memories with us. And if you enjoyed today's deep dive, make sure to follow History Below the Pines podcast wherever you listen and leave us a review. It helps other history lovers find these stories so that we can keep sharing them. I'm Levi Kessler, and we will see you next time as we continue to uncover the history right here below the pines in the Black Hills of South Dakota. This has been another History Below the Pines Storytellers Collection podcast. I'm your host, Levi Kessler. I'm also the lead producer and the editor here at the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our storytellers for joining us on today's show. We will see you right back here next week for another great episode of the Storytellers Collection podcast.